I never expected to find love among the pines, but then again, I never expected to find a hidden grove of rare plants smack dab in the middle of Breckford, North Carolina, either. Life has a funny way of sneaking up on you when you're busy staring at moss through a magnifying glass. It was early June and the air was thick enough to swim through. I'd been trudging through the woods for hours, sweat trickling down my back and mosquitoes feasting on every inch of exposed skin. But I didn't care. I was on a mission. Dana Marie Sullivan, you are certifiably insane, I muttered to myself, swatting at yet another blood-sucking fiend. Normal people go to the beach on their vacation. They don't hike through tick-infested forests looking for plants that probably don't even exist. But I'd never claimed to be normal. My mama used to say I came out of the womb with a wildflower in one hand and a field guide in the other. She wasn't far off. I pushed aside a tangle of wild grapevines and promptly lost my footing on the steep, leaf-covered slope beyond. With a yelp that would have done a coyote proud, I went sliding down the hill, scrabbling for purchase on anything that wasn't poison ivy. I came to an abrupt and rather undignified stop at the bottom, leaves in my hair and mud just about everywhere else. But as I looked up, ready to unleash a string of words that would have made my sweet southern grandmother reach for the smelling salts, the curse died on my lips. There, nestled in a natural bowl formed by the surrounding hills, was a grove unlike anything I'd ever seen. Shafts of golden sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating a riot of greenery punctuated by splashes of color that had no business being there. My botanist's heart started racing faster than a NASCAR driver on the final lap. Holy moly, I breathed, scrambling to my feet. It's real. It's actually real. I'd heard whispers about this place, murmurs of a hidden sanctuary where plants thought to be extinct still thrived. But I'd chalked it up to small-town gossip and too much moonshine. Now, standing at the edge of what could very well be the botanical find of the century, I realized I'd never been so happy to be wrong in my life. As I stepped into the grove, my eyes darted from one impossible sight to another. There, nestled between the roots of an ancient oak, was a cluster of Franklinia alatamaha, a tree that hadn't been seen in the wild since 1803. My fingers itched to touch its waxy leaves, to confirm it wasn't some elaborate hoax. This can't be possible, I muttered, fumbling for my phone to document the find. But as I raised it to snap a picture, a voice rang out, nearly startling me out of my mud-caked hiking boots. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I whirled around, almost losing my balance again on the slippery ground. Standing at the edge of the clearing was a man who looked like he'd stepped straight out of one of those cheesy romance novels my best friend Emma was always trying to get me to read. Tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world, and eyes the same deep green as the surrounding forest. He was watching me with a mixture of wariness and amusement that made my cheeks flush hotter than the Carolina summer. "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to sound authoritative despite looking like I'd just lost a wrestling match with a mud pudding. "And what do you mean you wouldn't do that?" He took a step closer, and I caught a whiff of pine and something spicier. "Name's Kai. Kai Hawkins. And I mean that taking pictures of this place isn't the best idea. Some things are better left undocumented." I bristled at that. "Undocumented? Do you have any idea what's growing here? This grove could revolutionize our understanding of plant resilience and adaptation. It needs to be studied, protected." Kai's expression softened slightly. "I know exactly what's growing here, Dr. Sullivan. That's why I've been working to keep it secret for the past 5 years. My jaw dropped. "How do you know my name?" He chuckled, a low, rich sound that did funny things to my insides. "Breckford's a small town, Doc. Word gets around when a hotshot botanist from the big city starts asking questions about mysterious plants in the woods. Didn't take much to put 2 and 2 together when I saw you tumbling down that hill." I felt my face heat up again, this time from embarrassment. "Right. Well, Mr. Hawkins, if you know who I am, then you know I'm here to help. This grove is incredible. It needs to be protected, studied. We can't just keep it a secret." Kai's expression turned serious. "And what happens when word gets out? When this place is overrun with scientists and tourists? How long before someone decides to collect a sample and ends up destroying something irreplaceable? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. He had a point, as much as I hated to admit it. But still, the scientist in me rebelled against the idea of keeping this discovery hidden. There has to be a way to study this place responsibly, I insisted, to learn from it without endangering it. Kai studied me for a long moment, his green eyes seeming to look right through me. Finally, he nodded. Maybe there is, but it's not going to be easy and it's not something you can do alone. I squared my shoulders, lifting my chin defiantly. Good thing I'm not alone then. I've got a whole university department behind me. He shook his head. That's exactly what we don't need. Too many people, too much attention, but… He trailed off, seeming to consider something. If you're willing to work with me, to keep this place a secret while we figure out how to protect it properly, then maybe we can find a way forward. I hesitated. Everything I'd been taught, everything I believed in as a scientist, told me that knowledge should be shared, that discoveries like this belong to the world. But as I looked around the grove, at the delicate balance of life that had somehow survived here against all odds, I knew Kai was right. We couldn't risk destroying this place in our eagerness to study it. All right, I said finally. I'll work with you. But I'm going to need to bring in at least one other person. My friend Emma. She's the environmental lawyer, and if we're going to protect this place long-term, we're going to need her expertise. Kai nodded slowly. Okay, but no one else. Not until we have a solid plan in place. I stuck out my hand, realizing too late that it was still caked in mud. Deal. To my surprise, Kai took my hand without hesitation, his large, calloused palm engulfing mine. Deal, he echoed, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Now, Dr. Sullivan, what do you say we get you cleaned up and then I'll give you the grand tour? As I followed Kai out of the grove, my mind was already racing with possibilities. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but I knew one thing for certain. My life was never going to be the same after this day. Little did I know just how right I was, or how much was at stake. The secret of the pines was about to change everything, and not just for me. The battle to save this hidden wonder was only just beginning, and it would test not only my scientific knowledge, but my heart as well. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of secret meetings, hushed phone calls, and more mud than I'd seen since my college days spent wading through Louisiana swamps. Emma, bless her heart, took to our clandestine operation like a duck to water. You mean to tell me, she drawled, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee mug, that you found a botanical garden of Eden and now we're playing secret agents to keep it safe? Dana Sullivan, your midlife crisis is way more interesting than mine. We were huddled in my tiny kitchen, the warm scent of chicory coffee filling the air. I'd known Emma since our days at Ole Miss, where she'd been the only sorority girl who didn't look at me like I'd grown a second head when I got excited about moss. Now, with her power suit and take-no-prisoners attitude, she was exactly the ally we needed. It's not a midlife crisis, I protested weakly. It's a scientific imperative. Emma's perfectly arched eyebrows said she wasn't buying it. Uh-huh. And I suppose this imperative comes with piercing green eyes and shoulders you could land a plane on? I felt my face flush. Kai's not… we're not… I sputtered, then gave up. Oh, hush up and drink your coffee. We've got work to do. The truth was, I didn't know what Kai was to me. Colleague? Conspirator? Something more? Every time we met at the Grove, I found myself noticing things that had nothing to do with botany. The way the sunlight caught his hair, turning it from dark brown to burnished gold. The gentle way he handled even the most delicate plants. The passion in his voice when he talked about protecting this hidden wonder. But there was no time for whatever this was. Not when we had a fight on our hands. All right, let's get down to business, Emma said, all traces of teasing gone from her voice. What exactly are we up against? I spread out a map of Breckford on the kitchen table, pointing to an area just north of the Grove. Southern Pine Development Corporation. They've bought up most of the land around here. Their plan is to clear cut the forest and build a gated community. Emma's eyes narrowed. Those bottom-feeding, environment-destroying... She muttered a few choice words that would have made a sailor blush. Okay, we need a plan. Have you looked into getting the area designated as a protected habitat? I shook my head. That would require going public with what we've found. Kai's adamant that we can't risk it, not yet. And what does Mr. Tall, dark, and secretive suggest instead? Before I could answer, a knock at the door made us both jump. I opened it to find Kai on my porch, looking like he'd run all the way from the grove. We've got a problem, he said without preamble. They're starting the survey today. If we don't do something fast, they'll find the grove. Emma was on her feet in an instant, grabbing her briefcase. Time to earn my retainer. You two, go to the grove. Document everything. Every plant, every animal, every blessed rock if you have to. I'll stall them as long as I can. As Emma's car peeled out of my driveway, Kai and I shared a look. This was it. The moment of truth. The trek to the grove was silent, both of us lost in our own thoughts. But as we descended into that hidden bowl of green, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This place, with its impossible beauty and stubborn resilience, was worth fighting for. We worked methodically, cataloging and photographing every species we could find. Kai's knowledge of the grove was impressive, and I found myself learning as much from him as I was documenting. How did you find this place? I asked as we paused for a water break. Kai was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. It found me, he said finally. I was in a bad place after I got back from my last deployment. Couldn't sleep, couldn't settle. I'd walk for hours in the woods, trying to outrun my own thoughts. Then one day, I literally fell into this place. He smiled ruefully. Sound familiar? I thought about my own stumbling entrance to the grove and couldn't help but laugh. Looks like it has a type. Yeah, lost souls looking for something to believe in. Kai's voice was soft, and when I looked up, I found him watching me with an intensity that made my breath catch. The moment stretched between us, filled with unspoken words and possibilities. Then, from somewhere above us came the distant sound of voices and heavy machinery. Reality crashed back in. We scrambled to finish our documentation, racing against time and the encroaching threat of destruction. As the sounds grew closer, Kai grabbed my hand. There's something I need to show you, he said urgently, pulling me towards a part of the grove we hadn't explored yet. We pushed through a curtain of hanging vines and emerged into a small clearing dominated by a massive old-growth pine. At its base, nestled in a tangle of roots, was a spring bubbling up from the ground. This is the heart of the grove, Kai explained, his voice reverent. The water from this spring feeds everything here. It's why these plants have survived when they've died out everywhere else. I knelt by the spring, my scientific mind already racing with possibilities. If we could analyze this water, understand its properties. A crash from above made us both jump. They were getting closer. We have to do something, I said, panic rising in my throat. Kai's hand found mine again, squeezing gently. We will. Together. As we stood there, the fate of the grove hanging in the balance, I realized something. This wasn't just about saving a bunch of rare plants anymore. It was about preserving a place of healing, a sanctuary for lost souls and new beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, it was about finding something I didn't even know I was looking for. The battle for the secret of the pines was far from over. But standing there with Kai, I felt ready to take on the world. Or at least a bunch of greedy developers with chainsaws. Little did I know, the true test of our resolve, and our growing feelings for each other, was yet to come. The next few days were a blur of legal maneuvers, clandestine meetings, and more coffee than any human should reasonably consume. Emma was a force of nature, throwing up every roadblock she could think of to slow down Southern Pine Development Corporation. I filed for an emergency injunction, she explained over our nightly strategy session. Claimed there might be endangered species in the area that need to be surveyed before any development can begin. I raised an eyebrow. But we can't actually prove that without revealing the grove. Emma's grin was downright wicked. Oh, honey, I don't need to prove it. I just need to create enough doubt to make a judge hit pause. It'll buy us some time, at least. Kai, who'd become a fixture at these meetings, leaned forward. How much time? A couple of weeks, maybe a month if we're lucky. Emma's expression turned serious. But we need a long-term plan. This is just a holding action. We spent hours brainstorming, tossing around ideas that ranged from the practical to the absurd. Buy the land ourselves? We'd need to win the lottery first. Get it designated as a historical site? Not without some creative storytelling that none of us were comfortable with. As the night wore on and our ideas grew more desperate, I found myself stealing glances at Kai. The lines of worry etched on his face made my heart ache. This grove wasn't just a scientific marvel to him. It was a sanctuary, a place of healing. Losing it would be like losing a part of himself. Without thinking, I reached out and took his hand. He looked up, surprise flickering in those green eyes before softening into something warmer. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of us, a bubble of understanding in the midst of chaos. Emma's voice broke the spell. Oh, for heaven's sake, you two. If you're done making googly eyes at each other, I think I might have an idea. I felt my cheeks flush as I quickly let go of Kai's hand. We weren't... Save it, Pinocchio. Emma cut me off with a fond eye roll. Now listen up. What if we don't try to hide the grove at all? What if we use it to our advantage? Kai stiffened beside me. We can't risk exposing it. You know what could happen if the wrong people find out. Emma held up a hand. Hear me out. We don't reveal everything. Just enough to get people interested. We pitch it as an ecotourism opportunity. A chance for Breckford to become known for something other than its annual possum festival. I couldn't help but snort at that. Our town's claim to fame was questionable at best. Think about it, Emma continued, warming to her theme. We set up guided tours, strictly controlled and limited in number. It brings in revenue for the town, creates jobs, and gives us a reason to protect the area that even the most pro-development politician can't argue with. It was crazy. It was risky. It went against everything Kai had been fighting for. But as I turned the idea over in my mind, I realized it might just be crazy enough to work. We'd need to be incredibly careful, I said slowly. Set up strict protocols, maybe even create a conservation trust to manage it. Kai was quiet for a long moment, his brow furrowed in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. If we do this, we do it right. No compromises on protecting the grove. And we keep the spring secret. That's non-negotiable. Emma and I nodded in agreement. It was a start, a glimmer of hope in what had seemed like an impossible situation. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Emma worked her legal magic, keeping the developers at bay while we scrambled to put our plan into action. I reached out to colleagues in the botany world, carefully feeling out potential allies who could help us without exploiting the grove. Kai, despite his initial reservations, threw himself into the work with a passion that left me in awe. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. As word began to spread about our unique botanical preserve, the pressure intensified. Southern Pine Development Corporation wasn't about to give up their plans without a fight. It all came to a head on a sweltering August afternoon. We were in the grove, mapping out potential trails for the guided tours, when we heard the unmistakable sound of heavy machinery approaching. Kai's face went pale. They wouldn't dare. Not without permits. But as we raced towards the sound, my heart sinking with every step, it became clear that legality was the last thing on the developers' minds. A massive bulldozer was cutting a swath through the forest, heading straight for the hidden sanctuary we'd fought so hard to protect. I've never been what you'd call an athlete, but in that moment, I ran faster than I ever had in my life. We burst into the clearing just as the bulldozer reached the edge of the grove. Stop, I screamed, waving my arms like a madwoman. You can't do this. The driver, a burly man with a face like weathered leather, just sneered. Says who, lady? We got our orders. Kai stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Says me, this land isn't yours to destroy. I could see the moment the driver recognized Kai. Something like respect, or maybe fear, flickered in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. The bulldozer's engine revved, ready to continue its path of destruction. In that moment, I did the only thing I could think of. I planted myself directly in front of the machine, arms outstretched. Dana, no. Kai's voice was frantic, but I didn't move. If you want to destroy this place, I called out, my voice surprisingly steady, you'll have to go through me first. Time seemed to stand still. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, feel the heat of the bulldozer's engine. But I didn't back down. I thought of the rare plants we'd discovered, of the spring bubbling with life-giving water, of Kai's face when he talked about finding peace in this hidden grove. Some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant staring down a 20-ton machine. Just when I thought my knees might give out, I heard a new voice cut through the tension. I wouldn't do that if I were you, unless you want to be slapped with more lawsuits than you can count. Emma strode into the clearing, looking like an avenging angel in a power suit. She was flanked by 2 uniformed police officers and a man I recognized as Judge Harrison from the county court. What happened next was a blur of legal jargon and barely contained fury. Emma, it turned out, had been 3 steps ahead of us all along. Not only had she secured the injunction, but she'd also managed to get the entire area declared a protected site pending further investigation. As the crestfallen bulldozer driver was escorted away and Judge Harrison read the developers the riot act, I felt my legs finally give way. But before I could hit the ground, strong arms caught me. That, Kai said, his voice a mix of admiration and exasperation, was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I looked up at him, a giddy laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. Why can't it be both? And then, with the dust of battle still settling around us and the fate of our beloved grove finally secure, Kai did something that surprised me even more than his secret sanctuary had. He kissed me. It wasn't a perfect kiss, by any means. We were both sweaty, covered in dirt, and I'm pretty sure I tasted like fear and adrenaline. But as his lips met mine and his arms tightened around me, I felt something slot into place. Like the final piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known I was solving. When we finally broke apart, I saw Emma slow clapping in the background, a smug grin on her face. About time, you two. Now, if you're done with the romantic comedy moment, we've got a grove to save and a town to revolutionize. As I looked around at the grove we'd fought so hard to protect, at the friends who'd become family, and at the man who'd started as an adversary and become so much more, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The secret of the pines had brought us together, given us a purpose, and maybe, just maybe, helped us all find a little piece of paradise in this corner of North Carolina. There were still challenges ahead, no doubt. Turning our wild dream of controlled ecotourism into reality wouldn't be easy. But standing there, with Kai's hand in mine and the soft whisper of ancient pines all around us, I knew we were up for the fight. After all, some secrets are worth keeping, some are worth sharing, and some, like the love growing between Kai and me, are worth nurturing into something beautiful and enduring. Just like our hidden grove, we were only just beginning to flourish. If you enjoy heartwarming, inspirational Southern stories, then pick up a copy of Ernest Dempsey's latest novel, The Final Round, through the link in the description. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories from Magnolia Crossing when they're uploaded. Thanks for watching.